Well, as you can see at a distance, we're in Nashville, Tennessee today, and we're headed to Woodlawn Memorial Park Cemetery. Even though we tried to stay away from the interstate today because it's so busy, even taking some of the off roads or back roads through downtown Nashville, you'll notice it is a very busy town. But Nashville is known, of course, for a lot of its tourists that they have. It's a big industry for Nashville, Tennessee. Now that we're at the cemetery and we've gotten out of the car, as you can see, the flags are waving there. It's a windy day. It's rather cool. I should say it's really cold. And with that wind blowing and all the traffic from the main highway that we're going to be real close to, I've decided just to mute out the noise from the cemetery and just do a voiceover for the video when I get home. So let's head on up toward the grave sites. I was lucky today with the weather being so cold that the two graves that I want to be visiting today are so close together. They're actually just one row apart. The graves of these two people are of two music legends, and they just happen to be brothers. I'm talking about Dan and Jim Seals. If you come in the main entrance to Woodlawn Memorial Park Cemetery, the first section on the right is where these two brothers are buried. You can see the gazebo there, and that is the area where they're buried at, very close to that. We went ahead and parked a little bit farther down because they're having a funeral at the cemetery today, and we didn't want to be in the way of traffic coming and going. Dan and Jim were both one half of a well-known singing duo. And I'm not talking about a duo together. I'm talking about each one of them perform with someone else to start with. But they did over the years perform together as, of course, Seals and Seals. I'll talk about the individuals personally on them, but I'll also talk about their groups. So as we go along, I'll just give you a little history on them, and maybe you'll find out something that you didn't already know about them. Jim and Dan were both born in Texas, and their parents were Sue Luella and Eugene Wayland Seals. The family moved around some in Texas, so the brothers were not even born in the same town. Jim was born in Sidney, Texas, and Dan was born in McCamey, Texas. For the most part, when they were performing together as a duo or with their other duo partners, they were considered to be singing soft rock music. But later on, Dan would switch over to being mainly just country music. I probably should have already mentioned before now the name of their singing duos that they were in, but you probably already knew that, or you would probably be this interested in the video. Anyway, Jim was in the singing duo of Seals and Crofts, and Dan was in the singing duo of England Dan and John Ford Coley. As we get closer to the gazebo, you'll notice that it's directly across from a tar shop there, and like I said, it's at the first section on the right when you come in the cemetery. But you could go to the very last two rows of graves up close to the tree line there, and that's where you're going to find the brothers' graves, one in each row there. Well, we're getting close to the graves now, and I'm going to wait till we get up near each grave site, and then I'll talk a little bit more about them. As we're getting closer to the grave site, we'll see which one is in the row nearest to the gazebo first. It's nice that it's such a cold day here in Tennessee that I only had to look for these two rows, and there were small rows at that. So, on to the first grave. Well, the first grave closest to the gazebo happens to be the younger brother of the two. That is Dan, and his birth name was Danny Wayland Seals. I'll give you a chance to look at the marker and maybe read what's on it. I'll try to zoom in a little bit closer here to it. And then I want to talk about some of Dan's accomplishments. Besides being a singer of country music and soft rock music, Dan Seals was also a songwriter and a guitar player. I've already mentioned that Dan was part of the duo of England Dan and John Ford Coley, but he had the England Dan nickname before he ever started in the group with John Ford Coley. And it is said that the nickname came about because his brother Jim's, whose grave we'll be seeing in just a minute, gave the nickname to him because he liked to hear English music of the Beatles and such. So that was the reason he did that. We're going to take a look at the grave next to Dan's before we look at his brother's Jim's grave. And the grave next to Dan is that of his son Jay. Sorry about the scarf blowing there, but it was pretty windy, as I'd said earlier in the video. But as you can see, Jay was a sergeant in the Army during the Afghanistan conflict, and he also was a writer as well as an editor for a magazine. So now, directly behind Jay's marker, we're going to be taking a look at that of the marker for Jim Seals. Jim was born with the birth name of James Eugene Seals, and as you'll look at his marker, I'm going to try to go slow enough that you can read it without having to pause on the marker. But I want to mention a few things about him. You already know he was a singer, and he was in the group of Seals and Crofts, of course. And I'm going to talk more about the groups in a minute that they were in. But Jim was not only a singer, but he was a songwriter. He could also play the fiddle, the saxophone, and a guitar. Jim, at a very early age, was interested in music, and his dad also liked it, and they were listening to like the Grand Ole Opry on the radio and such. But Jim wanted to play a fiddle, and so his dad did buy him one, and at a very early age, I think it's somewhere around 8 or 10 years old, he would end up winning the Texas State Fiddle Championship. Shortly after being so accomplished on the fiddle, his half-brother Ray would be a saxophone player, and Jim found an interest in saxophone, so he ended up finally deciding that he needed a saxophone, and of course his dad bought him that, and he became a accomplished saxophone player. And here I'm just giving you a closer look at the business across the street from their graves. I've talked mostly about their personal lives and information of them growing up and such, but now I want to talk a little bit more about their music. I'd like to mention now a couple of things about Dan as being in the duo with John Ford Coley, and that is that him and John Ford Coley were classmates in high school even, and they started out as a duo singing group in the 1960s. And probably the most popular song that you'll remember that they sang is I'd Really Like to See You Tonight, or at least that is my favorite song that they sing. About 1980, Dan and John Ford would split as a duo, and Dan would start to pursue a solo career as a country music star. And he is known for winning a couple of CMA awards. One was Single of the Year for the song Bop, and another one was a song that he sang as a duo with Marie Osmond, and it was called Meet Me in Montana. Jim was one half of the Seals and Crofts duo, and the other person was Daryl George Crofts, who went by the name Dash. And the most popular song, or at least I call it their signature song, and my favorite song that they sang was a song called Summer Breeze. Close out my video as always saying thank you so much for watching my video, and I hope you have a good day. And I thought I'd give you just an idea of how cold it is here today in Tennessee. That's some rather large icicles. Once again, thanks for watching.